Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Well, today is a very exciting day. My book, Fat Quarter Workshop, is here. And so we're going to be shipping those out to all of you. I am going to be signing them and personalizing them for everybody who pre-ordered. And if you see this video and you order from us, we'll sign and personalize that one as well for you. It is a combination of our top 10 downloaded patterns from Stashin with Stephanie, which is our subscription club where you get 12 fat quarters every month. Check that out in the link below if you don't know what that is. It's a really great deal. And in addition to getting a discount on this book, you also get discounts on additional fabric each month if you want to make a full quilt from your bundle. And then also you get access to all the patterns that aren't in the book. You gotta get the book to get the ones that are in the patterns. Also, you get all the ones that are not currently in the book. You get those for free. It's a $200 value, and it increases every month because we put out a new one. So today we are going to do a replay of our tutorial for frequency. It is the first quilt kit, or the first quilt design that is in the book, Fat Quarter Workshop. This was by far our most popular pattern ever that we have done for Stashin with Stephanie. It's a really striking quilt. It's a modern looking Bargello. It kind of looks like sound waves, hence the name Frequency. And we did it in a black, white, and gold fabric collection that we were able to get at the time to feature in our Stashin with Stephanie club. And you guys just could not get enough of it. Now, I will say there's a little bit of a cheat here because what we used when we did it was 2 matching fat quarter bundles. So you can either use 2 matching fat quarter bundles of 12, or you can have 12 half-yard cuts, and it works the same in what you're doing with that. And the instructions say that in the book. So I've always been on the lookout for another fabric collection that would recreate the look that you get in Frequency. Sometimes you see a quilt like this and you're like, I love it, but how can I get that fabric? Well, the original fabric is long gone, but we were able to find a collection that will create that. So you can see a digital version of the quilt here, and you can see that it looks really, really similar, and totally recreates the essence of the original one. And we are going to have these kits available for a limited time until they sell out over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We're going to have those purchased separate from the quilt book because some people may already have the book and want to get the kit now that it's available. So if you don't have either, make sure to get both of them together. We're going to take a quick look at the fabric and take a closer look at that. And then you guys can watch the video tutorial on how to do this. It's a really fast Bargello because there are hardly any seams to match throughout the entire thing. I think it's just that center seam that you have to end up matching in the end. So it goes really, really quick, but it is a lot of small pieces. So it's a lot of fun though, and the results are just stunning. So let's check out that fabric and then we will play the tutorial for you. If you ever get a kit from us, they come in these really nice boxes. It's a nice clear top, and then this is like made for a shirt box below. So they look really pretty sitting in your sewing room until you're ready to use them. And then the box can be reused for other things, whether it's storing other quilts or gifting something yourself. I'm going to take this out. We're going to take a look at it a little closer. So this collection is called Silverstone. It is from Wishwell. If you watched our Stashin with Stephanie video, they also did the fabric collection for that. I think it's a very talented designer. In this case, it has a little bit of metallic in it, and so there's a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver metallic mixed in here. It is really, really pretty, really gorgeous. And if you are putting fabrics together for this on your own, if we've sold out by this point, you're not able to get it, you want to do like 4 light gray, 4 medium gray, and then 4 of the darker black. And then that will get you your cool mix and get that frequency going up and down as it goes out. Well, I hope you love that collection as much as I do. It really is going to capture the essence of the original Frequency. So if you missed out on that a couple of years ago when we did it, and the fabric is no longer available, you can't get it anywhere, this comes as close as you can possibly get to having that original. And so those kits are going to be available while supplies last over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. let's get to the replay of the video tutorial, and you guys can see how simple this quilt is to do, and you can get the book and the pattern or the kit if you want over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Thanks so much and happy quilting. So first things first, what I've done is I've kind of lined these fabrics up in order of lightest to darkest. That way it's going to travel from the lightest fabrics to the darkest when I am doing my strip piecing. So whether you're using the fabrics that we are using here, or you are mixing and matching from your own stash, or doing a completely different colorway, that's what you want to do. You want to order it from lightest to darkest, so that way when we start doing the Bargello style, that color change is going to sort of weave in and out to create those sound waves as we place that. So here's the other really good trick you're going to use. What I'm doing, because we have to eventually get this into a tube, is when I line up my pieces here, I'm going to line it up so that way my selvages are nice and even with each other, like this. That way I'm going to have something to line up against, and I'm going to have a nice straight tube to cut down when we get to the Bargello part. So make sure as you are strip piecing all these together that you are always lining up those selvage edges. All right, so now I'm just going to sew my 1/4 inch stitch all the way down here. Now you could sew these just keeping on adding to the strip each time. What I found was easier was to sew everything into sets of 2. So what I'm going to do next is flip these guys right sides together, because these are pieces 3 and 4 in my light to dark color spectrum here, and I can just start sewing those guys together next. All right, so now I have everything sewn into sets of 2, and before we sew some more, I'm going to go ahead and press these. I like to press my seams open for this. It makes for a really flat sewing, and it helps keep your strips from getting that little bend in them that sometimes happens when you're sewing long strips together. Let me show you how. Working from the wrong side of the fabric, I'm going to open up that seam with my fingertips. Then I'm going to put the nose of my iron right down the center of that seam, and with my 4 fingers down just ahead of the iron, I'm just going to go ahead and go straight down that seam. What you want to make sure you're looking for is that when you are all done, you have a nice straight line here. This seam, as I'm looking at it here, is perfectly straight. If you have done it wrong, if there like is a pleat on the other side, then it'll look a little wiggly in here, and you'll actually be able to feel that extra fabric when you see it. So what you're looking for is this nice straight line as you're going through. Go ahead and finish that out. And I don't like lift and press and lift and press. I just go straight down, keeping the center of my iron right down there when I'm doing these long strips. Now, I'd like to also hit it from the other side here. And this is another area where you can double check to make sure you've done this right. If you see any pleats or puckers or anywhere where it's not perfectly straight, it means you probably have pressed a pleat into it, and you need to fix that, or your fabric is not going to turn out the right size. You can also see here I've got this edge with the selvage completely straight with each other, and that is so when we make the tube we have something to line it up with, so we have a nice straight tube as we go, as opposed to something with a little bend in it. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to go ahead and sew all these together into sets of 4, and then eventually sew them into a giant tube. And I already have a tube ready to go, so we're going to take a look at that right now. All right, so this is what the tube looks like when it is all sewn together. You can see it is all sewn completely from one side to the other. And you can see here that what I did when I joined it, so here's my darkest piece sewn to my lightest piece. And I've made sure that this part up here was exactly even with those selvages when they got lined up. That way when we go to the next step and we're going to cut them apart, it goes much easier because you have a nice straight tube to work with. If you get this off, then it's going to have like a little bit of a bend in it, and it's not going to work quite right. All right, so I've got my tube laid out, and you can't see the bottom of it, but what you're going to do is you're going to lay your ruler on it, and you want to make sure that the measurement you're cutting to is beyond this. So like, say if you were doing this and it was 3 inches wide, well, you would want to make sure that 3 inches starts after this bit. Otherwise, you're going to end up with selvage in your piecing, and that's not good. That's not what you want. So I'm going to go ahead and get that lined up. I'm not going to give you the measurements exactly here because we want you to get the pattern. If you see something that you love from us and you want to support us,
get the materials and the pattern from us, and that will help keep the free video tutorials coming to you. So we thank you for that. So what I'm going to do is just line everything up, and I'm making sure that a nice inch line of the ruler is even with the top. And then I'm kind of checking as I go down that I'm also even here. Your quarter inch seam might not be absolutely perfect, but as long as you're hitting parallel to your seam line, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine as long as you can sew consistently throughout your piece. So as long as I'm making sure that the measurement that I need to cut this to is past where that selvage is, I'm going to be good to go here. So now I'm just going to cut. All right, now for this first part, I need to flip everything around and I need to square this up. And I'm going to make sure that I kind of scooch everything over to make sure that my edges are nice and lined up still so that everything is the size it's supposed to be. All right, so this we can get rid of. We don't need that, but we do want to keep these. And what I do is I just stack them to the side as I'm cutting. So going forward, for all of these, you can just keep on cutting all the way down until you've cut as many as you can from your strip tube. And then we're going to move on to the next step where we start sewing the top together. So you've essentially already created almost all of the rows for this. We're going to put them together next, but all this piecing, all this here that you've already done, it's already all together and we are almost ready to get this top together. So it does go a lot faster than it looks, even though we're doing with little pieces for this month's pattern. So right now you really need to refer to your assembly diagram in your pattern because you should have numbered your fabrics from 1 through 12, and that way you know exactly where you're supposed to be cutting. I'm going to sew together rows 1 and 2 in this video, and once you know how to do that, you're going to be able to do everything you need to do for this pattern. So this is a modern Bargello style quilt, and what that means is the pieces are going to kind of move out in a staggered but planned order as they go out. And it also means that we don't need to use any seam rippers or rotary cutters for the rest of the cutting. We're just going to use a trusty pair of embroidery scissors. I really like my micro tip ones. They have a spring-loaded action, so they just pop open. So if you have hand problems, they're great for that. And they're also really sharp. We've got these on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. All right, so first step for row 1, what I need to do is you can see the white line where that seam is, and I'm just going to cut right on top of where that seam was to take off that seam allowance. And I know this is kind of scary because we're cutting into a seam allowance, but it works out perfectly. All right, so now I can open that up and I've got 1/2 of my row. I'm going to repeat that with the other side. And now I have the other half of my row for row 1. So we already have everything pieced together. We just have to sew this little center seam together and row 1 is complete. So it's super fast, super quick. All right, so now we're gonna get row 2 ready to go. What I like to do, and what I found works best for my brain where I'm least likely to screw up, is to do 2 rows at a time. So I'll do 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4 because you are just going to go out halfway, and that'll make sense in just a second here. All right, so this seam is part of the one, it was the last one that was sewn together when the tube was joined. So what I need to do is I need to press the seam open so I have a guide to do. So I'm gonna do that real quick here. So just like before, I just open that up and press that seam open. So in order to create the Bargello style, we need to have this lightest fabric here start in the middle. So what I'm going, and then everything else kind of, you know, staggers down. So what I'm going to do here is, now that we have these seams pressed open, is I'm going to fold them in half and I'm going to meet up those folds on either side, just like that. So you can see here, I've got the folds right on top of each other where those seam allowances are. So they're right on top. So once I'm satisfied with that placement, I double check both sides so that I have a nice straight edge on top. I'm just going to pinch that. And then I'm just going to finger crease that to give myself a center. And then I'm going to stick my embroidery scissors in, give it a little trim, and now I have my stagger point. And these rows should be the exact same width when you do this. By cutting off those ends and then also by cutting it in half, you remove the same amount of seam allowance. So your rows should be the same length when you put these together, and they're really cool, and it will just continue to create this graduated step motion. And it's really great. You just kind of have to pay attention to where you are at when you are trimming and getting everything ready to go. That's why I like to do 2 rows at a time, and then I can look and see, okay, I did this next time, so that means next I need to move into the fabric that is after that, which would be having the whole one of this be next. So just refer to your pattern assembly diagram, make sure you are numbering your fabrics, make sure all your fabrics are sewn together in the same order when you are putting your tubes together. But if you do that and you just take it slow, you will be able to do this with no problem. And you can mess up a couple of them, because I certainly have as I've been doing this. When I make the pattern for the first time, I'm writing it as I go. So I don't have something to follow. I'm making those notes and making those mistakes, so I know where to tell you guys where to watch out for, and this is one of them. So I recommend just doing 2 rows at a time, and you'll be good to go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a trim, and then we're going to sew these guys together and join our rows. All right, so I got that fold again. Give it a little trim, and then line it up. So you can see how this is starting to look cool already, because that is just going to be that graduated step out. All right, so now I'm going to fold these right sides together so I can sew these center 2 seams together, still using that 1/4 inch seam. All right, so I really just have to line these up like I would any other fabric I was sewing together, and it's not a huge amount, so it is, you don't have to pin this. You can totally get away with skipping that if you want, but by all means pin it if you feel like that will help you. Then to save a little bit of time, I'm going to chain piece the next row in. So now I'm going to give these a little press, and it's important to remember that you're going to have more than just a seam that you just sewed to go together, because you also, in some cases, are going to have that area where it was pressed open, where that last join was. We already did it for this one, but that's not the case for all of them. And a lot of times this seam here was where the edge of the tube was, so it kind of got flattened out a little bit when I was doing my cutting. So I want to just hit that again as well. Just give it a good look to make sure everything is nice and flat before you proceed. All right, so this part's really cool. You're going to have no seams to match at all, ever, for the entire rest of the assembly of this quilt, except for the center seam. So it's no big deal. It's pretty easy, and even that, you've got 2 of the same fabrics together, so if you're a little off, nobody is ever going to know. So what I do is I lay them right sides together, and I just look from the top to make sure, since those seams are pressed open, that those seams are right on top of each other. You can always peel this back a little bit to see how you're doing. And then I put a little pin in the right side of that seam allowance, because when we are sewing, we're going to be sewing through from here, and then I can stop with my needle down on the left side of the seam allowance, pull the pin, and then everything will stay in place. Now, since there's a lot of seams here, but none of them match, that means that I really don't pin that much for the rest of this. So I'm going to go all the way down to the end of the strip, and then I'm going to match those corners, put a pin in, and from here I take it 1/2 at a time. So what I do is I'm going to grab the halves where the pins are, and then I'm going to just lay them down and kind of hit about the middle. And I like to put the pin in where there is a seam on the back, and that just kind of gives me a good stopping point. I'm not judging that this is like exactly in the middle, it's just halfway, like a 1/4 of the way in between. Then I'm going to split that again, so we've got our pins at the middle and then at the 1/4. And I'm going to do the same thing here, where I just kind of pull them taut, lay them down, make sure my edges are nice and lined up, put a pin in, and again, that's through the seam allowance on another one. Do that one more time on this half. All right, so I've got a pin at the end, 1/4 way through and halfway in between that, in the middle, and again halfway in between the quarters. I'm going to repeat that on the other side, getting these ready to go in the sewing machine. And when I'm doing this part, once I have all my ones together, The way I kind of split it up is I did half of one of the frequencies at a time. So when I did it, I kind of just based it on how many I could fit on my table. If I could have fit more, then I would have done more. But I could fit about half on when I was just laying out the rows. And then once I was pretty good, I could see all the steps, I knew everything was going in the right order, then I took a break and I started sewing them all into sets of 2 and 4 and so on until I had an entire half together, and then I would move on and do the bottom half where it comes back together. I find that that really helps if you can think about how you're going to break up the construction of a quilt, because if you're just looking at all of these really thin rows, it can seem a little overwhelming. But if you think of it in sections like that, like first I'm just going to get all my rows together for half of one of these, and then I'm going to get those together, and then I'm going to move on and I'm going to do another half. And then you can easily break that up into a couple hour segments and really feel like you've made some progress. So that's how I kind of tackle it in my head. You do what works for you. So I do leave this first pin in long enough just to get those first couple of stitches in, so I know that that is good and secure. And then what I do is I kind of just pull it taut until that first pin. So I'm always kind of working from pin to pin here. And I just kind of put my hand down to kind of keep it nice and taut. You don't want to stretch it out, that would be bad, but you do want to keep it kind of snug. And the other thing is, because there's a lot of these seam allowances here, I kind of lift up every time I go over this lip to make sure that those are laying nice and flat. And yes, if I do have one flip, I will unpick that and flip it nice and flat, because that will ensure that my quilt lays super flat and I can do whatever I want when it comes to quilting. So again, every time I get there, just kind of lift this up, and that kind of helps that seam that's pressed flat just lay the way it's supposed to. Right, so I've got to the first pin, so again I'm just going to grab until I've got that other pin, and I'm just going to repeat as I go down this strip sewing my 1/4 inch seams. I'm going to press this seam open as well, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently just because we have all these seam allowances that I don't want to get pressed going in the wrong direction. So what I'm going to do here is start just like before, where I open up that seam allowance. But instead of just sliding the iron straight down, I am still opening that up with my fingertips, but I'm going to lift and press for this one. So just lift and press your way all the way down, and that will help keep these seam allowances from getting pushed in the wrong direction as you are working. Once you work your way all the way down, you're going to flip everything over, and you're also going to press from the other direction. This one I do just slide straight down. If anything feels like it has curved at all, what you can do is you can just kind of straighten that out however you need to as you press. And if you feel like anything needs to get a little bit flatter, you can always use a little bit of spray, just water, or a spray starch alternative. And I tend not to use steam in my iron. I feel like that distorts the fabric, and I'm worried it's going to damage the iron. So I prefer to just use an external source like that water bottle or a spray starch alternative if I feel like I want to get it even flatter than what the iron has done on its own, which is plain heat. Alright, so we're going to keep doing that. We're going to get all of our rows together, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's all joined. Alright, so you're going to join your rows in the sets of 2 and 4 and so on until you have one entire frequency put together. And there are a couple of these throughout the quilt that you're going to put together, and you can see here how it just sort of goes out. So you've got your whole one, and then a half, a whole, and a half, and it just keeps going out and out. And because we've sewn that in a tube, all you have to do is snip in the right spot and use your assembly diagram and your pattern to go with this. The pattern is called Frequency. You can get that at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. I recommend you label your fabrics so that way you know which one is which number, so that you end up with the right area, and you can see it comes back to center there. And then here's the kind of fun thing about this quilt. It worked out really well math-wise for it to be the length to be kind of the length of a, not quite a twin, but close to it. And then the width, once you get all of these together, is perfect for like a lap twin size. We're putting them together as vertical rows. And so when it's all together, this is what it looks like as a vertical row. And you can see it kind of looks like a sound wave going in and out. We'll show some photos of the finished quilt to you all so you can see that as well. But again, if you want to join along and get in on the fun, you can always join Stashin with Stephanie for $29.99 a month, and that gets you 12 fat quarters for the price of 10, a $10 off a $20 purchase coupon, free patterns. Every single pattern that we've ever done for Stashin with Stephanie you get access to for free as soon as you join up. And we've already sent out this fabric. This was the fabric that we sent out for April, but if you, or May, it's May, isn't it? It's almost June. Time is flying by. It's been a busy spring for us here at Quilt Addicts Anonymous. So we've already sent this out as our May bundle, but we do have more of it while supplies last. So go ahead and order that at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. This is called newsprint, and we use the entire bundle of that, and it is from Cotton and Steel with their rebrand where they are focusing on fabric designers from around the world. This features all of the artists from Japan. So thanks so much for following along. If you liked what's going on in our video tutorial, please like and subscribe here on YouTube. Ring the bell so you know when we're getting new videos. You also can sign up for our emails over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We have hundreds of free video tutorials, and we specialize in modern contemporary quilting fabrics over there. So if this is your jam, come check us out. We'd love to have you over there. Thanks so much for following along, and until next week, happy quilting.